morning and welcome to World Talks, coming to you live from Warsaw. I'm Stalia Strzemska. As the third year mark of Russia's full-scale invasion approaches, much is happening, both on the international stage as well as on the front lines. Since taking office last month, President Trump has taken a radical turn in U.S. foreign policy, deciding to negotiate directly with Russia to secure a quick end to the conflict. Trump has also insulted the Ukrainian president by calling him a dictator who had, and here I quote, talked the United States of America into spending $350 billion to go into a war that couldn't be won. To help us unpack all this, I have Daria Kaleniuk, the co-founder of the International Center for Ukrainian Victory, joining me here right now. Good morning. Delighted to have you with us. Thank you for joining.
Good morning. Good to be here.
Okay, so let's start with Keith Kellogg's visit to Kyiv, because Zelenskyy said that this restores hope, even though the envoy himself said that he is in Kyiv mostly to listen, right? So what shall we make of that visit?
It is good that this visit did happen. However, we have to keep in mind that Keith Kellogg was sidelined in negotiations from the part of talking to Russia. So it is unclear whether, to which extent he has influence and power inside a Trump administration. It is important that those who are actually making up the decisions are present in Ukraine, are talking to Ukraine, are able to go to the front lines and see what is happening there. So obviously the visit of Keith Kellogg is a good sign, but in overall, the most recent statements from President Trump, Vice President Vance is extremely worrying for Ukraine and for Ukrainians.
Right, I believe that Volodymyr Zelenskyy is sort of trying to keep up the appearances, right? I mean, given what has been said towards him. Now, I wanted to ask you about a recent statement from Mike Waltz, National Security Advisor, because he suggested that allowing the U.S. to access minerals, of course, the deal that Trump wanted to make at the very start, would be the best security guarantee that Ukraine could hope for. And this has resurfaced yesterday. So Waltz said that again. Of course, Trump really wants to revive that deal. Do you think there's any chance that Zelenskyy will make a deal?
Well, it depends what will be in a deal, because apparently the deal which was initially proposed by the American side was too extensive. I don't have the access to the documents, but from the reading and readouts from media, I see that it was kind of extortion from Ukraine. It was not just critical minerals. It was about all minerals, almost all minerals, and it was about critical infrastructure, ports, railways. And it's unclear also how the deal could have been implemented practically. According to Constitution of Ukraine, all natural resources of Ukraine belong to the Ukrainian people. And just to give up half of our natural resources to unclear fund, which will be controlled by unclear people, all that looks clearly weird. And I would like to remind that President Zelenskyy was the one who actually back in September suggested for American investors to come and enter Ukrainian market for investments into the natural resources. So basically, it is the interest of Ukrainian people and President Zelenskyy to make that natural resources deal. However, it has to be reasonable. Also, it is important to have certain security guarantees, because even if something is in the deal that Americans will enter Ukrainian ports and natural resources, the question of the practicality is, okay, why they would enter if there is no security guarantees, and if Russia can fire a missile any moment on these sites. So there are many questions, and also the most important one is that Ukraine was sidelined from the conversations and negotiations with Russia. And President Zelensky said it publicly that he's ready to talk, he's ready for negotiations, but it is important that nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. And Ukrainian people fully support this statement from President Zelensky. These are Ukrainian people which are dying. These are Ukrainian people whose brothers and sons and daughters and sisters have paid enormous price, sacrificed their life for freedom in this war. So we must have a seat at the table.
Right, and sort of the statement that you've just mentioned, nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine, has also been repeated by numerous European politicians, right? And we had these two meetings in Paris following the Munich Security Conference. So what are the key takeaways? What can Europe do for Ukraine? What is Ukraine expecting Europe to do?
Well, finally, I think Europe, after Munich, realized that it's not just a faraway war, and that we are all together in the same jet, which is burning. And yes, Ukraine is in economy class. Entire other Europe is in business class, but the fire already arrived to business class. And because of the comfort, most of the Europeans and European nations didn't really pay enough attention to what's happening in Ukraine and didn't treat this war as their war. But it is actually war in Europe with threat to entire European continent. And if America will quit Ukraine and quit Europe, which is very likely to happen, so the question is what Europe will do. And it's better to prepare now and make strong, bold decisions, which we were asking and expecting Europe to do for all these 3 years. Decision number one is that Europe is sitting on about $250 billion of Russian frozen assets. Most of this money are kept actually in the European countries, in Belgium and France. And Ms. Lagarde is just saying that it's too risky to confiscate them. So I'm asking the question, isn't it too risky not to confiscate this money and not to spend them for weapons to help Ukraine win and prevent this war from entering the territories of actually European Union, including Poland? So I applaud Prime Minister Tusk, who yesterday just said that it is an important decision to make this Russian money frozen in Europe work for defending Ukraine and replacing American support. If that is not happening in the coming weeks and months, then there is high likelihood that the United States will lift sanctions and this money will flow to Russia, back to Russia. And either this money is being spent to produce weapons now to defend Ukraine and Europe, or this money will return back to Russia, which will spend it to produce more weapons to destroy Ukraine and prepare complete destruction of Europe. So this is the choice. Another choice, which is critical, is actually be serious about sending troops and boots on the ground and wings on the air from European continent to Ukraine now as a security guarantee. And the choice is like that, and especially it is for Poland. Either to send troops now in Ukraine to resist Russian aggression with Ukrainian people on Ukrainian territory, or alternative could be, and it's very realistic, it sounds surreal, but it's very realistic alternative, that once Ukraine will fall and Russia takes over Ukraine, Polish people have to face the reality that they might need in some future to fight Russian soldiers jointly with Ukrainian soldiers in Poland, in Polish territory. Because you know what Russians are doing when they are occupying territories? They are turning all their resources, human resources, weapons, and all the industrial capability and capacity and knowledge of war into their benefit. So they are transforming Ukrainian people as Ukrainian occupied territories into the Russian soldiers. So the same strategy will be applied in Ukraine if they will take over Ukraine. So now is the time for the bold decisions of Europe to wake up, to understand that it is our joint war, for survival, and America very likely, the chances very likely, might departure not from only Ukraine, but actually from the entire Europe, which means that NATO Article 5 might not be a security guarantee anymore and might turn into the Budapest Memorandum for entire Europe.
Right. So, I mean, boots on the ground, of course, are a controversial issue, but I wanted to go back to what Prime Minister Tusk said, because he also mentioned strengthening air policing, of course, and the EU borders, right, and with Russia. And then let's swiftly adopt new fiscal rules to finance the EU security and defense. So this is something that the EU finance ministers were discussing. And also, I wanted to bring in Keir Starmer, UK's Prime Minister, because he said that US security guarantee was the only way to effectively deter Russia, just saying that the EU on its own cannot really do that.
Oh, I think EU is fallen in the trap again of underestimating their might and their force. So if there is a will, if there is a united position to actually sacrifice some of the spending, instead spend this money on the defense and do some bold decisions, which might sound risky to some heads of the national banks, like seizing Russian 250 billion. If that is done now in a right moment, then Europe is much, much stronger than Russia. And it is better to have Ukraine on the side of Europe. I'm telling you that for Russia, it is critical and it is important to pause this war for a while, not for a long time, but to pause and imitate peace so that then sanctions are being lifted. I think that after departure of the US from Ukraine, which will mean stop of the flow of weapons and stop of the flow of other support, the next step would be lifting sanctions. And the question is, once Americans lift sanctions, will Europeans be able to maintain the sanctions, including maintain the freezing of 300 billion of Russian assets? And apparently, I'm hearing that Hungarians are not going to support the extension of sanctions.
Right, they're already saying that, of course. Peter Sierto already has said that they will not do so. But, Daria, help me understand, because, of course, we're talking about sort of consequences of what has unfolded. But President Zelenskyy said that Trump is living in a disinformation bubble. So how did he got there? Why is he so, pro-Russian? It seems that he's blinded to what has been, going on, perhaps misinformed.
I don't know, because I don't read Trump's mind. But we have to face the reality. The reality is that one of the policy directions of actually American new administration could be total departure from Europe, which is starting from departure from Ukraine. It could not be just only Russian disinformation. It could be actually one of the ideas of policy ideas which are being implemented. We don't know for sure, but we shouldn't take this scenario out of the table.
Daria Kaleniuk, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching World Talks. Please stay tuned for more here on TVP World.